Hi everyone, I am Dr. Anisha, your microbiology faculty, and today I will be having a quick discussion about two viruses that are Epstein-Barr virus and Varicella zoster virus. Now, under these two viruses, I will be discussing about their disease manifestations, malignancies, if any, and the important latency sites for these two viruses. Now, let us first talk about Epstein-Barr virus. Now, Epstein-Barr virus belongs to Herpes viridae family. One thing. Then what is the subfamily that Epstein-Barr virus comes under? It is the gamma subfamily. And third thing, what is the official name of Epstein-Barr virus? For confusing you, examiners give those official names. So what is the official name? It is human herpes virus 4, HHV4. So how do you remember this official name? So let's take the name itself, Bar. So does it sound similar to char? Char is a Hindi word for 4, right? So this derives its official name, that is human herpes 4. And what is the latency site for Epstein-Barr virus? That also comes from the name itself. So let us highlight this letter B. So it is the B cells or B lymphocytes where the Epstein-Barr virus is getting latent into. One thing. Then for transmission and the pathogenesis, it is very important to know that Epstein-Barr virus requires a close oral contact or close contact with oral secretions, which is helping the transmission of this viral infection or which is helping the transmission of this virus, right? So now what happens? So this particular virus, Epstein-Barr virus, it binds to special receptors or specific receptors, important question, that is CD21 or complement receptor 2 on B cells. And what are the cells, epithelial cells, which are getting affected by this particular virus, or the cells which are infected by this particular virus? These are the respiratory epithelial cells, or we can say pharyngeal epithelial cells, and B lymphocyte, which are affected. So now it is the B cells where this particular infection or Epstein-Barr virus, this particular virus, becomes latent. And it is the reactivation of this latent virus which is leading to the malignant transformation and further disease manifestations. So for clinical manifestations, let us consider one mnemonic, that is EVM. Can we use Epstein-Barr virus or EVM as a mnemonic? So with M, can we derive two important disease manifestations which are mostly asked in your exams, and it then and there concludes the infectious conditions associated with Epstein-Barr virus? These are firstly infectious mononucleosis, as well as certain malignancies. Now, when it comes to the malignancies associated with viral infections, this is considered to be one of the most important questions which get asked from the viral section itself, with the malignancy or oncogenic potential of certain viruses. So what happens in infectious mononucleosis? One thing to know is that infectious mononucleosis is affecting adults And why adults? Because there is close, intimate oral secretion contact. And this is the reason why infectious mononucleosis is also known as kissing disease. Right? So, what are the findings which we get in infectious mononucleosis or clinical features in infectious mononucleosis? Firstly, patient will have fever, malaise, hepatosplenomegaly. Patient will have lymphadenopathy. Patient will also have exudative pharyngitis. And then important clinical findings for EBV infection or infectious mononucleosis is that there is going to be atypical lymphocytosis. And the important antibodies would be found in the sera would be heterophile antibodies, which is a key differentiating feature between infectious mononucleosis as well as mononucleosis-like condition or mononucleosis-like syndrome. So what would not be present in mononucleosis-like syndrome would be exudative pharyngitis and heterophile antibodies, whereas atypical lymphocytosis would be present for mononucleosis-like syndrome, right? So this concludes the important clinical findings of infectious mononucleosis. Now for oncogenesis, it is important that first thing we must know the latency site for Epstein-Barr virus. We have already discussed it is the B cells where EBV is getting latent, right? So it is the B cells where the replication is occurring. So it is not inside the B cells where replication is occurring, but this Epstein-Barr virus, it is causing the immortalization of B cells. So that means these B cells are going to multiply indefinitely. One thing, indefinite multiplication is occurring. And with recurrent EBV infection, there comes a time when malignant transformation of B cells occur. So there are recurrent EBV infections which are leading to malignant transformation of B cells. B cells are occurring, right? So now for more oncogenic potential, it requires two important antigens. And what are those antigens? We have a mnemonic lemon. So what do we derive from lemon? We have latent membrane protein 1, L and M, we are using for the antigen. And then we have N. So it is Epstein-Barr virus nuclear antigen. So we have used N from lemon for this particular antigen, ABNA. Right? So what are these two antigens doing? These are majorly responsible for proliferation of cells. So one important thing about ABNA is that it is going to cause activation of cyclin D, which is ultimately leading to proliferation of cells. Right? And then important function of LMN or LMP1 antigen is that Firstly, it is going to increase the presence of angiogenic factor like VEGF. So it is going to cause angiogenesis. More number of vessels would be supplied to the malignant cells. Angiogenesis leading to angiogenesis. Then it is going to decrease the anti-apoptotic factor BCL2, further leading to increased proliferation of malignant cells. Which is exactly the mechanism of malignancy when it comes to Epstein-Barr virus. So these two antigens are very, very important for malignancies associated with EBV. So now coming to the malignancies, so we have four major types of malignancies. So first let us write it is Burkitt lymphoma. Burkitt lymphoma. Most important question with Epstein-Barr virus. So what is the interchange which is occurring? What is the mutation which is occurring in Burkitt lymphoma? It is T814. So how do we remember that? 8 and B. So can we write 8 for B? And T, it is the double T that we have in Burkitt lymphoma. So it is the most common malignancy or most common defect or mutation which occurs in Burkitt lymphoma. It is nothing but a jaw tumor affecting young children and mostly Africans. In 90% cases, Africans would be affected in Burkitt lymphoma, and it is also asked as an image-based question where you would be given an image of an African child with a jaw tumor, and the most common or most probable answer for that particular question is going to be Burkitt lymphoma. And the virus, the question can be twisted and you can be asked about the virus with which this particular malignancy is associated with, and you must know the answer to correct. Now, the second malignancy it is associated with is nasopharyngeal carcinoma. Then we have Hodgkin's lymphoma and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now, which Hodgkin's lymphoma? Another potential question, it is the mixed cellularity type. And mostly 50%, in 50% cases when we have Reed-Sternberg cells, they are positive for Epstein-Barr virus DNA. Very, very important. And for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, so the CNS, all CNS NHLs as well as 50% systemic NHLs have EBV DNA. Again, very, very important points to be remembered. Now, it is not just this mnemonic that we are using for oncogenesis. We can very well use this mnemonic lemon to remember the malignancies which it is associated with. With L, we can consider lymphomas, that is Burkitt lymphoma, Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, right? Then with N, we can have nasopharyngeal carcinoma, right? And with M, we can use which kind of Hodgkin's lymphoma? It is the mixed cellularity kind of lymphoma. Mixed cellularity kind. So this concludes the malignancies that EBV are associated. So another important syndrome that is a very potential question in your exams nowadays, it is the Duncan syndrome. Now Duncan syndrome, it is an X-linked recessive syndrome. So it is associated, this syndrome is associated only with adults, male adults. And it is a rare condition. It is a condition where the human beings or adults are absolutely normal throughout their childhood. And once they have this EBV infection, it is after this infection, after acquisition of this infection, that malignant transformation occurs. Malignant transformation occurs, and these people become susceptible to a lot of malignancies. Then gamma globulemias occur. So these become susceptible to a lot of lymphomas. So this particular kind of condition, it is known as Duncan syndrome. So let's see a postcard which helps us identify the important points or important tests which are associated with EBV. So firstly, Paul, it stands for Paul Bunyan test. One thing. We'll be discussing Paul Bunyan test in the next slide. Then Epstein, very well we can derive Epstein-Barr virus. Then with KISS, we can derive the kissing disease. And with L, we have so many things to consider. Firstly, we have the lymphomas. What are the lymphomas? Hodgkin's, non-Hodgkin's, Burkitt, right? That can we say that it is the latency in the B cells which we have? Then can we say that we can have atypical lymphocytosis? So if one of these words come for your exams, whether it is Paul or KISS or Epstein, you can very well come up to the answer of the question. So let us talk a little bit about Paul Bunyan test. It is a tube agglutination test. Tube agglutination test. And what do we do in this particular test? We mix equal quantities or equal volumes of patient sera, and this patient sera needs to be inactivated, heat inactivated. Inactivation of sera that occurs at 56 degrees for 30 minutes, right? So we have this inactivated sera, and now we are going to mix this sera with 1% sheep RBC. Equal volumes have been done. And then finally, we look for the agglutination. And the significant titer is, titer comes out to be 256, more than 256. Then we consider it as Paul Bunyan test positive. But this particular test, it is not specific for Epstein-Barr virus. It can be seen for other infections as well. So in order to confirm the test or to confirm the presence of Epstein-Barr virus, we can do one important test, that is monospot test. again asked in your exams. Now, let's come to another important virus, that is varicella zoster virus. So with C, let's derive its official name, that is human herpes virus 3. So 3 for C, one thing. Then it is responsible for two important clinical conditions. One is for childhood and one is for adults. So it is responsible for vesicular eruptions as well as it is responsible for zoster or shingles. Right? So two forms for varicella zoster virus. One, it is known as chickenpox virus. Chickenpox virus. And the second manifestation, it is the zoster or shingles. With zoster, remember zonal. Zonal. You would know why we used Z for zoster and Z for zonal. So what is the type of infection? So chickenpox virus, it is a type of primary infection which usually affects the children. So it's a childhood viral disease or infection. Then what is zoster? What type of infection is zoster? It is secondary infection. And why do we say that it is a secondary infection? Because there is reactivation of this particular virus which is occurring. And why is reactivation occurring? Because of the latency. And where is this latency occurring? It is in the trigeminal ganglia. So it is reactivation of the latent virus, right? So this is a secondary type of infection, whereas chickenpox is a primary infection. And this zoster, it majorly affects, or it is a disease of adulthood, or it affects adults, or maybe adults of later age group, that is more than 60 years as well. So what is the type of rash in chickenpox? It is vesicular. Firstly, the rashes are vesicular in nature, and there are bilateral as well as diffuse in nature. And the description which we use for shingles or zoster is that these rashes are unilateral and segmental. Why do we say that these are segmental? Because this particular virus, it infects or it affects the segments of a particular nerve which is causing the innervation of a particular site. So a site which is innervated by a particular nerve, it is only getting affected. The most common site which is affected for the zonal transmission or zonal type of rashes, it is the ophthalmic branch of trigeminal nerve. Very, very important question. Now let us discuss about the complications first. So we'll be discussing about the complications of varicella zoster virus or shingles. So for shingles, let us say that Nora, she loves to jingle, right? Or dance. So it only helps us derive the complication. First is N. N stands for post-herpetic neuralgia. Then we have O. It stands for herpetic ophthalmicus, ophthalmia. Then with R, we have Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. Jiggle, we can very well use for shingles. And with TO, we have already discussed it is the ophthalmic branch of trigeminal nerve, which is most commonly affected, or it is the most common latent site. Most commonly affected nerve is ophthalmic branch of trigeminal nerve. So this is the segmentation or the unilateral or segmental type of rash which is seen in herpes or shingles. So it is just the portion of the nerve which is supplying this particular area of the skin, right? And the kind of rashes which we get in shingles are hemorrhagic in nature. And these are very, very painful rashes. So now let's see what these rashes look like, what happens exactly. So in this image, we can very well see the unilateral nature of the rashes, right? So it is the side of face which is the most serious complication which can occur, and which nerve is getting affected. It is the ophthalmic branch of trigeminal nerve, and this is also known as herpetic ophthalmicus when face is involved. Then it can involve mouth area as well. Then shoulders are also common sites, and most commonly ribs and waist. These are the most common sites which are getting affected in shingles. So what are the stages of these rashes? Firstly, the early stage, that is between day 1 to 5, we have smaller rashes and with bumps which are very less in depth. They are not very, very deep. Then the mid stage, which occurs from day 5 to 7, and we have larger rashes which are fluid filled bumps. And lastly, we have days 7 to 10, which are blisters and are crusted over. So we have crusted blisters present. So this is how the stages of this particular type of rash take place when we are talking about herpes rashes or shingles rashes. So most importantly, these are unilateral in nature. So now let us talk about Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. So what happens in Ramsay-Hunt syndrome? If most of you know that Ram, he hunts with an arrow. So whenever he is trying to hunt with an arrow, he takes his arm very, very close to his face, towards his mouth and his ears, and that exactly derives the conditions or the clinical manifestations of Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. So remember, first thing, in tetrad we have vesicular eruptions on the external auditory canal, external auditory meatus. Then we have vesicular eruptions on the tympanic membrane as well. Vesicular lesions. And these are very, very painful, you must know. Then eruptions would also be present on the tongue. And lastly, there is going to be facial palsy. Facial palsy. So of course, there's going to be asymmetric smile, asymmetrical facial muscle tone. then the person would not be able to close eyes, which will result in a lot of irritation in the eye. And these lesions, all of these lesions are very, very, very painful, which is an important differentiating feature between other rashes which are present. So chickenpox, it's a disease of the childhood. Chickenpox, it affects children. So what is the incubation period? It is around 20 to 21 days, or we can write 2 to 3 weeks. And for description of the rash, now the rash of chickenpox, it is centripetal in nature, and it starts from the face and trunk, and it rapidly involves the plexus surfaces. And one important point about the rash of this particular virus is that they appear in crops, which means that at one particular time we can have maculopapular rash, can also have vesicular eruptions, nodular lesions, as well as scabs. And every time a new crop of rash occurs, it is always associated with fever. So at one particular point, you can see all the different stages of developmental rash. So this was about the important clinical features or important rash description which you get asked in your exam as clinical based question. So now we have already discussed about the complications of shingles, where we spoke about the herpetic neuralgia, then zoster ophthalmicus, herpetic ophthalmicus. Now we'll be talking about the complications of chickenpox. So firstly, patient can have secondary bacterial infections, most commonly. Then there can be varicella pneumonia. Then patient can also have Gray syndrome. After aspirin intake. And there can be CNS manifestations as well. And what are these manifestations? They can be meningitis, they can be encephalitis, and cerebellar ataxia. So next important point comes to the congenital varicella syndrome. So what happens in congenital varicella syndrome? So we have a typical manifestation which is seen when the risk of transmission of this particular infection to the child is highest when it is acquired in the early pregnancy. So what are the clinical manifestations that we have in congenital varicella syndrome? For this we have a mnemonic. So with C, it stands for cicatricial skin lesions, tricial skin lesion. Then with O, we have ocular manifestations, wherein we can have, the patient can have cataract, patient can have microphthalmia, and most importantly, chorioretinitis. Then with L, we have limb hypoplasia. Then what are the urinary manifestations or renal manifestations? We can have, the patient can have hydroureter, as well as there can be hydronephrosis. Then with N, patient can have mental retardation. With N, there can be autonomic disturbances or neurogenic bladder. And lastly, with S, patient can also have seizures. So these are the most important clinical manifestations which are seen in congenital varicella syndrome. So this particular image is a classic picture of a congenital varicella syndrome when the patient has cicatricial skin lesions, and of course there is limb hypoplasia, which is very well appreciable in this particular image. The patient will have microcephaly, chorioretinitis, and all of these features can be visible. So there is microcephaly in this particular case, and this is the typical cicatricial skin lesion which will be given as an important image-based question when asked about congenital varicella syndrome. So this was all about Epstein-Barr virus and varicella zoster virus clinical manifestations and latency sites. Thank you.